intents and purposes. My name's Emily.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I'm a parent educator. So I work for a social services agency, and what I do is I do like parenting classes, like for public and private institutions, and I do like professional trainings for like medical facilities and childcare facilities and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was listening to a conversation you guys were having a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, some of the stuff that you and just also just some of the stuff I've listened to of yours before, where you talk about parenting. Like, there's some stuff you say that's really interesting that lines up really well with the information that I work with that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some other stuff too that you say. So,
All right.
but yeah, I just wanted to kind of I don't know chat about that.
Yeah, go for it. Hit us up.
All right, cool.
What? So initially we were talking about, I think, corporal punishment for children.
Yes.
What? Yeah, I imagine you've got some topics. Run it down. What do you want to start? I'll let you lead the
Sure.
conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I guess so. Everything that you guys touched on that I was interested in addressing really
Mm-hmm.
kind of falls under the umbrella of brain development in kids,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think that's kind of an interesting way to break it down. But also specifically like within that, caring for babies, discipline, yeah, and picky eaters were the three I think I was most interested in that you
Oh
brought up.
yeah,
But
go for it.
yeah. All right. So I guess first of all, with I don't know how much you know about like brain development. Like, if you know like what age your brain usually develops until and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, like, I know that our brain finishes developing at roughly 25. I know that kids' brains are relatively plastic compared to adult brains. And then I don't know anymore, but I remember that, like, for Nathan, we always had to check, like, what's the developmentally appropriate age to be crawling, walking, talking, and then,
Yeah.
like, school concepts and everything, yeah.
Yeah. So like I think for most people, I think when you think about how brain development works, it's this idea that your brain's like this one blob that just levels up over time,
Mm-hmm.
like consistently. And actually, it's more like you have three different areas of your brain that develop, and they develop in really specific. Oh, and to be super clear, I'm obviously, but I'm going to be talking about neurotypical kiddos in this
Sure.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just to for whatever that's worth, because I certainly wouldn't want people like applying all of this stuff to all kids, because yeah, there's variants, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But so the I guess the first thing, talking about baby care. Unfortunately, I have to stick up a little bit for the guy you banned in chat who was talking about colic. But
Oh, sure. Wait, what
yeah.
was the
So
specific comment? Do you remember what I said?
yes, I do, and that's why I'm curious. Like, what? So what do you think colic is, or what have you heard about it?
Nothing. No idea.
Okay. So like because you guys were talking about like caring for babies and like how like what things you need to do to take care of babies.
Oh, I remember the
Mhm.
comment that, like, generally, like,
Yeah.
newborns are usually safe for, like, any disease or sickness or whatever. Like, it seems like pretty easy that you just, like, wake them up every 4 hours, you feed them, burp them, change them, and then you put them back to bed or whatever. And
Yeah.
then somebody said, well, if they have a
Right.
disease or whatever, it's like, yeah, okay, sure.
Well, yeah, and that's actually the reason I want to address that is because with colic, like that is what most people think of when most people hear the word colic. They think of like a disease or something that's wrong with them. That's not actually what colic is. And like there's this thing. Have you ever heard of the period of purple crying?
No, I've not.
Okay, so basically, not just all babies, but like all mammals that we've studied this in,
Mm-hmm.
have this developmental crying curve that you cry. So from the time you're 2 weeks old until you're like 2, 3 months old or so,
Mm-hmm.
you cry more and more and more every week. And again, this is true of like all babies that are mammals that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And then after like age 2 or 3 months or so, it starts to taper off and it goes back down. And purple is an acronym for it, which basically it just means that the crying is about nothing. But it's some babies are like really high on that scale, and so you'll get to like month 2 or 3,
Mm-hmm.
and a baby can cry for up to 5 hours a day and be perfectly normal and healthy and have nothing wrong with them. And you're right, other than that, like feed them, change them, burp them, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can do all those things and then also still have a baby that cries for hours, and even though you're like trying everything, you're trying all the soothing stuff, and like you're doing whatever you can, it still might not like completely absolve all of the crying. Usually you can reduce it with soothing, but that just depends on like who, like the baby, the temperament of the baby. And so like on the low end of that spectrum, you might get like 20 to 30 minutes more of crying per day. And that's it that you get in that increase in the first few months.
Mm-hmm.
And so why some people don't think it happens with all babies. But we used to call that colic. Like, so that increase in colic isn't actually like a thing. A lot of people think colic is like a baby that's gassy or like something like is wrong with them or
Sure.
something like that. But actually, like colic is just this word that we use for like there's an increase in crying, but that sounds like the baby has something, like they have a disease, they have something to be fixed or treated, and there a lot of times there just isn't. It's that you're just doing it because they're babies. That's how they like learn to cope with the world.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So
All right.
that.
What's the next thing you got?
um. So let me see. Check on. Oh. Um. Well, I'll probably come to that when we get to it. So with the, if we can touch on the discipline stuff, I guess a little bit. I guess you seemed pretty non-committal on it anyway, but like I guess just what would be your position as far as like physical correction?
I guess for me personally, the only time I think that some sort of physical correction seems necessary is like if you've got to correct like a negative behavior that's happening in like a time-sensitive manner. So like if you're out in public or something that's going on, then maybe in those circumstances. But otherwise, like aside from those situations, I think I'm almost completely against it. It just feels very like, not. I don't know. It seems really fucking weird. Like anything having to do with like delayed physical punishment, it just feels like very like torturous or like power trippy or I don't know, like a parent is mad or whatever. And then
Yeah, for
anything
sure.
past like some type of like anything past like a tap. I say like a tap because like usually, like I said, like some physical correction in it, like, hey, you need to like chill out. Anything that rises to the level of like you're out of breath after you beat the shit out of your kid or whatever is like way, way, way crazy. Or like actually like smacking your kid to cause like physical pain or something seems to be out of the, but yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at on it, I guess.
Yeah, and yeah, for sure. And I think that's the tricky thing with talking to parents about this kind of thing is like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think it's what was interesting to me is that in that conversation you said two things that lined up. So like a few minutes later, you guys are talking about like not giving in to your kids, like what, like being consistent, like when they want something, like
Mm-hmm.
when they, like are asking you something, like being super sure not to give in. Somebody was making a comment about that, about how
Yeah.
and you mentioned people not having patience in general, and like how yeah, if sometimes that happens, like your kid wants something, they might cry about it for an hour, and you've got to just like cope with that.
Yeah.
And so that actually
Oh.
ends up kind of being part of that piece as far as what do you do in public, because a lot of people who come into like looking for classes and stuff like that, like the first question they have is about that,
Mm-hmm.
is about discipline, and especially like what do I do out in public, like to get my kids to stop doing X. And that like first of all, if there was like an easy perfect answer for that, like
Mm-hmm.
there wouldn't be a million and a half like parenting books and series and all that stuff. But as far as like he said something like you like what do you do, like take them out of the store. If we're looking for an objective answer as far as what's going to address anything,
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, if you were trying to be the most objectively correct that you could all the time in parenting, I guess, yeah, if you have a kid who's like really thorough, like severely like acting up in a location,
Mm-hmm.
like yeah, taking him out of that to deal with it, and like having that situation of like, okay, well, if you're gonna act like this, we can't be in a store.
Sure.
But also you have to square that obviously with living pragmatically in the world and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
having to
Ideally,
actually live your
like, yeah,
life.
you could remove yourself from any meeting or any social engagement or anything at any time, but it's it's kind of hard to do sometimes. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think it's like, and that's the tough part too, is like people don't want to hear that. Like people don't want to hear that okay, do you want the thing that will theoretically, based on what we've got for research so far, the thing that will get the results the soonest? It's
Mm-hmm.
this, but also you're gonna have to like completely ignore the fact that you've got a life and you've got a cart full of groceries and you've got to like other shit to do that day.
Sure.
like,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, there isn't like a magic wand that
To
we
like
can
make their
kind
kid,
of,
yeah, behave all the time. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, petting. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, so that's that.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, let's see. Okay. So this is we'll touch on this one too. Again, this is just the other thing from that conversation. Then we can kind of talk more broadly if you want. So with the picky eater thing, um, so you said this is something that like you and like Nathan's mom would talk about a lot as far as, or like kind of clash on as far as how to deal with like meal times and eating and stuff like that. So like, can you say a little more about that?
In terms of how I feel about like picky eating or whatever.
Yeah, or like how to deal with a kiddo who like doesn't want to eat something when you serve it to him.
Okay. I'm working hardcore off of anecdotal evidence here. Okay, so it
For sure.
feels to me like I think that a child's palate will probably be about as diverse as you force it. I think that given the option, I think that a kid will always choose safe things that they like over and over and over again, and they will reject things that they don't like. And I think that as a parent, I think the onus is on you to kind of force them to try new stuff, because if you don't, they never will. I'm drawing from my experience with my kid and then my experience growing up. I didn't eat anything besides like one or two different things, like plain cheeseburgers, or like everything had to be like very, very, very basic, or I would fucking hate it. And it wasn't until I got into like my early 20s that I was like, hey, maybe I should try other food. And it was like very surprised, like, oh wow, there's actually like so much more food that I like than just like three things. Like, but I guess like I was so coddled, I guess, in terms of like my food stuff, because my parents are always super busy. They would just feed me whatever they need to like make me chill out, that I'd never like had to grow like a palate in early age or anything. So
Did they ever, do you remember anything as far as them like trying to get you to try stuff or?
yeah, they would always try to, but their method of trying to get me to try stuff was usually giving me exactly what I wanted and then putting the thing I didn't like on the side. And then my mom is, I love my mom to death, but my mom is very, very, very soft. So like if I would like cry and just not eat, then she'd break in like 2 or 3 hours every single time.
So there's that.
Yeah.
You said in like 2 or 3 hours?
Yeah, at the most, yeah. Yeah, and then I'm on the flip side where I guess I could be wrong. So if I'm ever in jail, I truly don't think a child will starve themselves to death. I think that hunger is an incredibly painful way to die, and I have a hard time believing that a child will literally sit there and fucking die instead of just eating something new. And yeah, and to be clear, I'm not making Nathan try like these crazy, like here's like some fried cockroach or something. Usually it's just like try eating a burrito with vegetables in it. It's usually just pretty basic stuff. It's not like crazy shit I'm asking here.
Yeah, so I guess from that, well, like what I would ask is like, how, I mean, did you have any health problems that you're aware of from growing up and eating mostly the same things a lot when you were a kid?
I mean, like, it's kind of hard to tell, like, micronutrient deficiencies. Like, I didn't have anything, like, ultra obvious. I don't know. Something that I kind of wonder, I don't know if it's possible, but I kind of wonder if I might be a little bit shorter than I should have. I was very, very underweight as a person. When I got to high school, I was 5'8" and I weighed 105 pounds. I was pretty light, and I kind of wonder if maybe I actually did starve myself to some extent, like if I didn't eat enough growing up. But in terms of like other like obvious problems, I don't think I had any like obvious health problem. Or I mean, I didn't. I was like a relatively normal healthy kid. Yeah.
Yeah. And so like this, like a lot of stuff in parenting kind of falls in that gray area of like weighing, risk and weighing, what's worth it, I guess. Yeah. What is like, I mean, everybody's heard the phrase about like pick your battles and stuff,
Yeah.
but like what is actually worth the possible end result. And so what we see with nutrition and kids and eating, I mean, everybody knows kids are like reluctant to try new foods a lot of the time. And it just, I mean, that's kind of a psychological thing that's kind of ingrained in us because like if you're out surviving and you're born in the woods or whatever and you go to forage for your food or something, like the mushroom that smells the most different and looks the most is like a different color is possibly like poisoned, right? So like there's kind of this innate aversion to eating new things.
Sure.
So if you think about like milk is like the most bland, unoffensive food on the planet, and then you kind of work your way up to like there's like the purees and stuff, and then you get into like the rice cereals and stuff, just all these really like simple basic things. But then you look at broccoli, which is like smells different and tastes different and looks different and it's weird, and like so yeah, it's really normal for kids to have an aversion to that. I mean, that's why vegetables are such a big like struggle for a lot of kids, is because of that. Like crazy difference of it. And so what what we see in the research is if kids are given like healthy balanced options, because obviously, yeah, if you feed them like goldfish at every meal, they're going to eat the fucking goldfish if they have it as a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have like a relatively like healthy like plate of like you've got like your like chicken and rice and broccoli and whatever, and then you like just continue to serve the broccoli over and over again, and if you like role model it, like they're more likely to try it than if you are really forceful in insisting like you are going to eat this thing, like this is like you're gonna, like this is what, like you can't get down until you eat this
Mm-hmm.
thing. And especially like the clearing your plate like mentality from generations past,
Yeah.
where like food scarcity is more of a concern, and now we know that that actually correlates pretty highly with like obesity and unhealthy eating, like
Mm-hmm.
compulsive eating habits. But yeah, it takes that exposure over and over and over again to something that's totally different for them to actually be comfortable trying it. So especially depending on the age of the kid, when they're really young, like letting them like play with their food, like to like fuck around with broccoli and see that it's not going to hurt them, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then yeah, like the more we like expose them to it and role model it and like show like, yeah, we'll eat this, like it's fine, it's like not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
That seems just as likely to get kids to be open to trying new things as it is insisting that they eat on it, which a lot of kids will grow up and like will not want to eat that particular food for the rest of their lives because
Mm-hmm.
they'll be so like averse to that associated with that experience. So like, yeah, exposing them
Mm-hmm.
to it is good.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as like, there doesn't seem to be any benefit in like insisting that they eat their vegetables, because they don't seem to get sick and die from not like
So
eating the
this
food.
might be like I'm talking about this a lot on stream, and this might be my bias. So my family is half Hispanic and then half Euro, whatever shit. Something that I noticed is that like it feels like white people food vegetables are actually really, really, really fucking horrible. And one of the biggest things that helped me in my early 20s was eating foods from different cultures made vegetables so much better, because it feels like in a white person's plate you have like meat, like a carb, and then like a vegetable is some nasty fucking thing that's thrown off to the side that's meant to be like suffered through, and you just eat it because it's healthy. And it's horrible. And so I never tried to make Nathan eat vegetables that way, but have you ever heard, I think this is a common dining experience, have you ever heard of like a Mongolian grill? Is it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so like this, so like Nathan within the course of like 3 to 6 months went from hating vegetables into like I can take him to like these Mongolian grill places and load his plate up with like 6 different, with carrots, broccoli, spinach, and all the other random shit there, and he'll eat it, and he's like okay with it as long as it's like in his meal and in his sauce and everything. Initially, it was really difficult getting him to do it, but usually my experience with him is that if I make him try something once, he hates it initially, and then he'll continue to hate it because I think he doesn't want to give in, or it's like a fight for him. Yeah, but the next day he'll ask for it again, and he'll be way more warm to it like the next day, I guess. Yeah, but I'm sure the process of getting him to eat it is pretty important as well. I'll never put like a plate of food in front of him and be like, eat all of this or you're grounded from everything. I hate the idea. When I was a kid, the worst thing for me was mealtime was always an opportunity for me to lose privileges, because I would get that if you don't eat your vegetables, you're going to lose blah, blah. And it made me I hated dinner because it was the worst time of the day, because it meant if they were going to serve me something I didn't like, I was fucked and I was going to lose my fucking computer, PlayStation or whatever. And I hated that. Usually for Nathan, it's usually just like, there's like 3 bites of this. Like, you can eat this. I want you to try this. And usually like, I find that like that process of warming him into it is usually okay. And again, like most of the food I want him to eat is good food. Like, you shouldn't hate it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'm never trying him to just eat like steamed broccoli that's just sitting there plain or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, my guess is too that probably when you were taking them to like the Mongolian grill place stuff, like you're also making a big deal about how good it all is.
Yeah, me
So,
and then
like,
whoever I would be, they're always eating that as well. Yeah, 100%, of course.
yeah, so that makes a big difference in it. But yeah, absolutely. Like the exposure to it over and over again, and the encouragement of like, this is a good thing. Like you like give it a try. It's fine. Like I'm definitely not saying like don't push your kid to try stuff. Yeah, but
Don't be
as
a
far
literal
as
food Nazi about it. Yeah, that
yeah, there's
traumatized
no
me
benefit.
growing up, so
Yeah.
I would never do that. Yeah, like here's your plate, eat all of this horrible shit, or you're gonna lose all your privileges.
Well, and you really, like, you touched on it too, talking about like, Nathan specifically trying not to to like eat the thing because he doesn't want to admit that he
Of
was wrong, and
course,
it's fine
yeah.
and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and the
like
funniest parts are where like sometimes he will try things and he will be incredibly like bashful or irritated or angry about it, but he really likes it and he'll eat the entire thing and then ask for more, like in a very ashamed manner, which is really funny. But yeah,
well, I mean, but we do that too as adults, right?
of
Because
course
like
I do it all
we,
the time.
yeah,
Yeah, of course.
right.
Super
Yeah, because
ego
I
driven.
mean, well, and again, I think that's where that for me that I think that's where that brain development is so useful when we like are trying to inform our parenting decisions,
Mm-hmm.
because something like that, like just being in that situation can feel super frustrating, that it's like, dude, just like just eat it, there's 2 fucking bites, like you can handle it.
Mm-hmm.
But also we have, okay, so your brain has these 3 parts, like I said before. So you have for lack of more sciencey terms, we have like the old brain, the emotional brain, and then the rational brain, or the executive brain. And so the first part of your brain, the old brain that develops, is just like, that's like 0 to 1, and that's like your most basic shit, like your survival instincts and your like sucking and swallowing and like blood pressure, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. This is
And
like
then
brain stem area versus like
yep,
midbrain versus
brainstem,
like prefrontal.
yes,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly. Yep. So brainstem, amygdala, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so toddlers and young children, up to around age 5, pretty exclusively live in that midbrain area, that emotional brain, that impulsive brain,
Mm-hmm.
and then have very little of that prefrontal cortex, the executive brain, that's making sense of everything else, and like rationalizing out like emotions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So for us as adults, we can absolutely get to places where we do. Ken Ginsberg is he's a professor of pediatric medicine from Philadelphia, I think, and he talks about how as even as adults, we can get so fired up in that like emotional part of our brain that we literally turn off your executive functioning piece. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's that fight or flight, that survival instinct thing. And so you turn off that section of your brain, and you are just acting on emotion, and that's when you're like an asshole during like a conversation or something like that, and you go back and think about it, and you're like, yeah, that wasn't a good idea, that I didn't really gain anything from that,
Sure.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So then if we go all the way back to like a kiddo that we're power struggling with over eating the rest of the broccoli on the plate or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and we expect them, like if we're standing over them saying like, dude, just eat this, and you like, if you step back and think about it, like, what do you think is the likelihood of that child suddenly, with no rational brain, to say, yeah, this is probably good for me, it's probably better that I just do this, it'll be over faster if I just eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's got almost none of that, depending on where he's at in his development. So expecting him to suddenly be like, yeah, you know what, you're right, I should just eat this, it'll do, I should absolutely just do that,
Yeah.
I
If that was
apologize
the
for
case, you
wasting
wouldn't
more
be
time.
struggling in the first place, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, with like just that, I don't know, for me, that gives me patience in dealing with that situation, like just acknowledging you literally can't think of this the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, with stuff like that, anything to do with a power struggle, I always encourage people, like, give your kiddo the option and then walk away for a minute and
Mm-hmm.
come back so that they can do it and then pout about it, and that's fine, because they
Sure.
did the thing you asked them to do. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's more likely to commit to that. Yeah. Let me see what else I have here. Let me go. Yeah. And really just, I mean, a lot of the stuff with like taking kids out in public and stuff too. Um, we don't prepare for that a lot of the times. Like, we
Prepare
tend to
for
have,
wait, what in public? Say that one more time. Sorry.
well, taking kids out in public, or like just situations where we know they're likely to like act up and be a
Oh,
pain.
gotcha. Okay.
Like, we don't really prepare for it. Like, we tend to have really like reactive like punishment styles. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so because yeah, whenever we have that conversation about like, yeah, what do you do, how do you deal with your kid not eating, how do you deal with like taking them into the store and everything.
Yeah.
But
The
like a lot of that, like,
that word that you use, reactive, that's how a lot of the it's one of the reasons why I'm generally opposed to the like the physical punishment, is because that's what a lot of it feels like to me. When I watch a parent spank a child, very rarely does it feel like, oh, a parent is trying to correct for negative behavior for future
Right.
scenarios. It more just feels like the parent is fucking mad and just needs to let go and just get them. Like, that's what
Absolutely.
it feels like most of the time. It's just the parent being really frustrated.
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I mean that is true, but also something you said earlier. You were talking about like, that delayed like physical action or whatever. And it's like, yeah, a lot of times when I'm talking to people about that and
Mhm.
about it being reactive, people will say things like, "Oh yeah, no, I never do it when I'm angry. I calm down first, and then we talk about why it's happening." I'm like, dude, that's sadistic as fuck. Like that's a
Yeah,
weird
that
thing to
always
do.
felt very like gore porn, like Saw or some shit like that. Like when
Yeah.
people describe their experiences of like, oh, like their parent comes home, they get their belt, and the kid goes into the room and they wait like an hour. Like that sounds so fucking weird to me. Like you're getting off as a parent on like beating the shit out of your kid. Like I don't know. Even with dogs and cats, you learn that like punishment only works if it's delivered. Like it has to be like at the moment of error or whatever. Like
Yeah.
for if you're gonna like spank a dog for like pooping, you can't like drag it in the room and like, oh, look what you did. Like they don't have the brain for that or whatever. Yeah, that type of
Yeah.
shit feels very, very, very fucking weird to me. Oh god.
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's exactly. Well, I mean, that's the thing we talk about on day one of like most of our general parenting classes.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mentioned like most people come in and like their first concern is discipline. Like, how do I deal with discipline? But
Yeah.
the first thing we talk about is parenting styles. And so we talk about how there's like basically you've got two ends of a broad spectrum, and then you might fall anywhere on that spectrum. And on one end of the spectrum you might be a super like strict like dictator style parent, or again these are like leadership styles, but
Hmm.
yeah, you might where there's no freedom, like there's all like it's absolutely because I said so or my way or the highway type of like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
So
um
stupid.
and yeah, and then obviously the far other end is like a doormat.
Hmm.
So let them do whatever they want. There's not really any enforced structure or anything. And like both, there are good things about both of those.
Hmm.
And so we're trying to balance those in like a freedom within limits type of situation.
Sure.
And so that involves a lot of like pre-planning, like thinking ahead of time, like not like trying to predict everything that's going to come up, but instead of just worrying about like, oh, what do I do in the grocery store when my kid acts up, it's like, okay, what can I do to prevent this problem from happening in the first place?
Hmm.
And also, how am I going to deal with it if and when it does happen, like, afterwards? So like, yeah, we worry a lot about like, okay, what punishment am I going to give my kid in the store? But yeah, that puts so much pressure on you as a parent too, to like come up with the perfect way to respond to this when you're probably like mad or like frustrated or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, But if we like drive up to the store and we let our kid know, like, okay, so we're going in today, like we have enough money for these things on the list. We're getting these things when we go in today. And only these things, right?
Hmm.
And like, okay, I'm also gonna get them distracted when we go in. And actually, you know what, I'm really gonna need your help because I need to find the pasta that you like. Like, I know we're getting that pasta today. Keep an eye out for it. Let me know as soon as you see it because that's the thing we need. But make sure you don't take anything else off the shelves. Like that's the thing. Like it's obnoxious to think about like doing that much prep for it, but that's the thing that makes the difference, is like trying to put in like that extra effort to be proactive as opposed to reactive.
Sure.
Yeah, and then also following up that afterwards, because like the other tough thing with like really young kids is when they're behaving well, we notice them less because
Yeah,
like
that's so the thing that gets the most attention is usually the negative behavior. Yeah.
yeah, so exactly. So yeah, they go out of the store and they were terrible and screaming and pulling stuff off shelves. And so yeah, I make this big scene and we have a big deal and they get, whatever punishment they get.
Hmm.
But if they go through and they're using an inside voice and they're keeping their hands to themselves, like that means my shopping trip goes relatively uninterrupted.
Hmm.
So it's really easy for me to just carry on and ignore that. But especially with young kids, like it is so, oh my God, it's so effective. It is so helpful with young kids to be able to just like make that extra like effort to look for like, oh, you were so quiet in there. Like that was awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what a good inside voice you had.
Hmm.
And like it take like that takes so little to like just the extra like weirdness of reminding yourself to do it.
Hmm.
But like the next time you go through the store, your kid will be like, here, do you hear how good my inside voice is? You hear how good that is? Like
Hmm.
kids thrive on that shit.
Yeah, I noticed that people always feel like you need to reward kids with candy and all sorts of stuff or whatever, which can be nice, I guess, every now and then. But I noticed that Nathan really, really, really seemed to like words of affirmation, I guess, like reminding him that like, hey, you did a good job at that. Because something that actually got a bit annoying is that later on what would happen is like if we would go into stores, he would start to like constantly remind us when his behavior was good. Like, oh, like, hey, Dad, aren't you happy that we did this and I didn't say this or do that? Or aren't you happy that like blah, blah, blah? And it's like, yeah, okay. But yeah, I
Hmm.
noticed that, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, yeah, a lot of this stuff, like, yeah, for sure it gets tedious, but
Mhm.
yeah, would you rather
But
have
better
that
that
than
than
him
a
screaming through
kid.
the store?
Yeah, that's like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, putting in all that kind of stuff around it was helpful. Um, let's see.
How do you? I feel like your job would be like one of the most miserable jobs on earth. I was excised from my kid's mom's family because I'm very bad when it comes to criticism in real life for people that I'm not trying to negotiate because I'm usually like really mean. That's just an internet problem or whatever. But like they had an issue I remember once where oh god, he did one of the cringiest things in the world is the like, well, if you did it to this person, I'm gonna do it to you. So I think that like his kids were out playing or something, and they were roughhousing a little bit more than they should have for sure. And one of the kids like hit the other kid with it's not like a wooden bat, but like one of those plastic hollow bats or whatever. And he shouldn't have, and it was dumb, obviously. But like the dad went out and he was like, oh, okay, well, you know what? If you hit him, bring that bat over here. I'm gonna show you what it feels like. So he made the kid walk across the yard crying, get the bat. He went back over, gave it to his dad, and his dad bent him over and like smacked him like pretty hard, like 6 or 7 times. And I remember talking to her sister, I was like, dude, your husband is fucking crazy. And her whole family hated me after that comment. I haven't been back actually. They hate me so much now after just that thing. But I was gonna say, it seems like I think in general parents are like very, 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 very ego driven or sensitive about like styles of parenting. I guess maybe it's a little easier because you have people coming to you that specifically want help, but I imagine you still must get like a lot of pushback on like people
For
like
sure.
yeah.
And I definitely like I do get a lot of people who are coming looking for it, but I also get a lot of people who are like mandated to be there too. So
Oh geez, okay, yeah, well,
yeah, that's
sure.
those are rough. Those ones are rough. But yeah, I mean it is, but like also my background is in like child development, but also counseling psychology. So like I'm pretty comfortable with like starting from this place of empathy with like getting to like what's like what their goal is, what they want, and like the spanking conversation, that's probably the most miserable one I have to deal with.
Sure.
Because yeah, people are so committed to that, and like they're ready when you bring it up, like it's a wicked trigger for people, like when
Yeah,
you're
for sure.
getting ready to talk about discipline. Yeah, so I
And
I've
it's
got
one of
this
those, it's
whole
a
like
really
preface.
big, I notice it like, I use this word, I think that a lot of people are really big into hazing. And when I say hazing, what I mean is that like, if they had to suffer through it, you have to suffer through it. And for a lot of people, that's literally the end of the fucking conversation. And this could be about like minimum wage. This could be about like corporal punishment as a child. This could be about like, shitty school systems. Like I noticed that there's a lot of pushback on new things. So one of the things that often comes up for the spanking thing is that like, well, I was spanked when I was a kid and I'm okay, blah, 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 blah. And like the mind immediately shuts off when it comes to that.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's oops.
What?
Sorry, I thought you cut out for a second.
Oh, no, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's that is so the approach that people are coming with, and like, and there for sure there are some people that are like they come in, that's their mindset, that's where they're going to finish the class with. Fine, whatever. I try to do harm reduction in other areas,
Okay.
and so, but for most people, I find the thing with that like yeah, they come in with that mentality for it, and so for those people, I could talk about all the like the massive amounts of research, because now there are like for so long there was no good like and all my stuff is evidence based, so like for so long there was nothing to like back the stuff up with. But now yeah, there are a ton of studies about like just spanking in general and how it like longitudinal studies on how it impacts people when they grow up. And so like even like I'll go to some of my classes I do are in jails, and I find like a lot of times I'll do classes for like fathers in jails who may be in jails for well all different kinds of reasons, and it's a really common, like crazy common thing that they like will get to the discipline conversation and they will all say, well, I was spanked when I grew up, but it was good, I needed it, like I like if they hadn't done it, I'd have been a lot worse. It's like,
Yeah,
dude,
it's like,
like
it's crazy
really
because
great.
that's like a reverse survivorship bias. Like that would be a thing you would expect somebody that was successful to say, but you actually are in jail and you still are having like a survivorship bias and you didn't even survive the thing. Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, that's a really, really mindfucky thing to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really consistent. That's the feedback that we get. But so when I'm approaching those conversations, I can't go into the like the ways that this could like hurt your kid emotionally, like how it could damage your relationship with them, how like I can't get into all that because they're already like totally closed off from that. But what I can talk about is that spanking doesn't like when we look at the research, it doesn't work. Like and then I can totally just like lean on the numbers with that. Like we get like just overwhelmingly what we see is like those immediate corporal reactionary punishments. They get like slightly improved behavior for like a little bit, but across the board, parents who go into like a goal of like, I want this discipline to work and I want them to get this out of it and whatever, those parents don't tend to meet their goals. They don't tend to be met long term compared to parents who use more proactive like methods like the ones we do in class and stuff like that. So yeah, they're not open to hearing about how it hurts kids emotionally because they're like, oh no, they're fine, they need to tough it up and blah blah blah. But when I tell them like, yeah, but it's not going to do the thing you want it to do, that doesn't seem to be the case as they get older with that. So that seems to be the most effective way to have that conversation. But, yeah. So in general, though most people are open to stuff after the first session of classes, because I try not to be preachy because I don't fucking know everything. I've got kids. I don't, I have plenty of days where I'm like, ooh, nope, that wasn't, don't feel good about that.
Sure.
And so, most people, like, after you go through like the first session of like kind of trying to meet people where they're at and like relate to what their goals are, everybody's got the same goal who's in a class like that, which is to like, do well by their kids. So you just kind of got to start from that and work your way up, see where you think you've got room to give and where you don't.
For sure. So here is a dicey question. I don't expect you to have an exact answer on this. Something that we're dealing with a lot now in child development and in schools and parents is, how do you figure out like if your child might be neuroatypical versus like this is within the realm of accepted possible behavior and I shouldn't be seeking some sort of like extra parental help for my child. So especially with things like ASD or ADHD, like how do you, what are, I'm not asking us for like medical advice, but like, what do you think are like general, like, it's like, this is always a challenging thing as a parent. So like for me, so like my son has ADHD, but for a long time, it's a really difficult, like, well, does he, or does he just need more, of a push in a certain direction? Or like, is this a failure of parenting and environment rather than, or like, what's like, how do you start to resolve these questions as a parent, I guess, for like the 50 people watching that have kids out there? So I just realized that my audience probably doesn't have children in large, but sorry, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if most of them are just because they're young and maybe going to eventually make this a good conversation. But you're right. That's a super hard question. And it's one that there aren't a lot of good answers to right now. But there are a couple places that I would start with that, which, first of all, if you have concerns about anything like that, I would always encourage people to seek out other resources, that you're able to, that you have available to you, because the earlier you find out about stuff like that, the better, because, if you ever do come to it conclusively, being able to get them that, the extra assistance in the spaces that they need it, the earlier you do that, we see a drastic difference in how successful those kids are. So, like worst case scenario, like we wasted energy, right? I mean, obviously the complication comes in when it also wastes like finances and stuff. But with the first kind of place we go a lot, especially with things like ADHD, it sounds a little simplistic, but I think it's a really important step, is looking at sleep. Because I think sleep it's really, really undervalued, like how important sleep is, especially for young kids, as far as how it affects their behavior. Because so when you go to, like, I don't know if you experience this, when you go to a lot of appointments with the intention of, kind of sussing out if there is anything atypical going on, one of the first questions they'll ask you is about what their sleep is like. Yeah, for sure. And because when kids are like, chronically have a chronic lack of sleep, the symptoms of that really closely mimic a lot of behavioral disorders.
I also, one thing I did, I forgot this until Nathan was a thing. I forgot how much sleep kids need. The idea that somebody could go to bed at 7:30 at night to wake up at like 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning that needs like about like 10 hours or whatever of sleep. It was really, really strange for me to get into the rhythm of that. Or it seemed weird to force somebody to go to sleep so early, but kids need a lot more than just like the 7.5 hours, or at least at the early ages, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, they need a lot in the earliest days. It's like 12 to 13 hours, and then
Yeah.
it goes down. And I mean, it depends. Obviously some kids will be a little bit different than others, but like all kids benefit from having like the nap and all of those hours and everything.
Hmm.
But the big complicating factor now that a lot of people come in with is actually like screen usage close to bedtime because the blue light factor.
Hmm.
So, yeah. So yeah, familiar with that, with how blue
I've
light affects your brain and sleep and everything?
tangentially, I've read a lot about. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I've heard quite a bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, with to keep it not too ridiculously sciencey, like just when you're exposed to blue light, which is going to be on any device that
Hmm.
you're using, your brain, the part of your brain that makes melatonin, which is the like natural thing that puts you to sleep, which is made when it gets dark outside, that it delays that. It tells your brain like it's still daytime, that blue light. And so it doesn't start putting you into your deeper REM cycles where you actually get the restorative effects of sleep.
Hmm.
So if you're like falling, I mean, us as adults, this affects us too, but like, gonna make our choices at this age. But for kids who, especially where their brains are still developing, the like so if they have like a Kindle or something that they have before bed, like, and I get that when you don't know any more about that, that seems like a good assistant for kids, because like, okay, they're quiet, they're resting, they're lying down, they're
Hmm.
watching their video or they're reading something or whatever, and then they go to sleep. But the if the blue light is like something that they're seeing really close to before they are unconscious, it's like when you're watching something and you feel yourself like zoning out,
Hmm.
like that's exactly kind of what's happening, as part of your brain kind of goes into a trance, like this kind of hold mode. And so if you go to sleep right after that, you might be unconscious, you might be sleeping, but
Hmm.
it takes so much longer for you to get into your REM cycles because your brain's not producing that melatonin that you need to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's really important to like try
Wait. Hello.
to have at least like an hour
Oh.
before
Okay.
between
Gotcha.
like viewing devices and when you want them to be asleep.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
sorry. Your mic cut off for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just because that. Oh, sorry. We good?
Yep. You're good. You're good now. Go.
We
Sorry. Go
still.
ahead.
Oh, okay, cool. All right. So yeah, just it. Yeah. That's a tough thing to combat now, where we have more and more devices available for kids, and I'm super pro technology for kids, but I think that's something that a lot of people don't know about and really can impact the quality of their sleep. So you can be like, oh, my kid's getting their 10 hours, like it's a fight, but they get the full 10 hours every night.
Hmm.
But actually, if they have blue light right up until, they could be sacrificing like quite a bit of the quality of that early sleep, and again could result in behavioral stuff. So
Sure. Okay.
so yeah, I think that's to say if there's anything particular
How do we feel? So I've always read a little bit about this, but
one.
are we at a consensus yet that social media is absolutely fucking horrible for like developing teens and shit, or is that still like, are we out to the
Um,
coffee on that one?
I mean, I can't say I've read all the literature on it to date. I mean, objectively, like probably, but it's also one of those like Pandora's box type of things.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like practically, what are we gonna do about it? Versus like, is it like terrible for young kids, especially preteen? Like
Hmm.
probably. Because I
In
mean,
terms
are
of
you
like, what are we
familiar
gonna
with?
do? I guess my question. So like, my kid is 9, and I noticed that anytime I visit, I try to go to school to eat lunch with him because it's fun to hang out with him and all of his friends or whatever. And
Yeah,
there are
yeah,
like
yeah.
kids in his class now. Then he's in 4th grade now, but back then in 3rd grade when kids actually went to school, way back in the past before they were doing long distance learning. I noticed that like there were kids in his class that already had iPhones and stuff, which seemed interesting to me, and I didn't know if like, should my kid have an iPhone when he's 9, or like, I don't know. It's a hard, like, I don't know if like getting them on like that whole social media train and everything. Do you mind saying how old you are, or approximately, I
Yeah,
guess?
no, I'm 30.
Okay, yeah. So I'm 31, and I can't imagine school and social interactions and all of that they're fun, but also carry a high degree of stress. I can't imagine having that stress of social interaction, or like maintaining that social image like 24/7, where you're like on social media and doing all of that shit like every fucking day. Like, I think just as we were starting to graduate, like Facebook and all of that was starting to take off, but like before that it was like MySpace and stuff, which not everybody really used, and the level of engagement and driving all of that was like not there. Man, that just seems like so much fucking pressure on kids that are like in high school and shit.
Yeah, like not only like, oh, is it so much pressure on high school? Kids, it's especially like difficult for for high school, like and especially preteen kids.
Hmm.
Are you familiar with Erickson's stages of psychosocial development at all?
Fuck, I feel like I've seen this before and heard the name, but go refresh me. Go.
Sure. Basically, it's a series of conflict, like developmental conflicts that we go through,
Uh huh.
and you kind of either navigate that stage of your life successfully, or if you don't, it kind of tends to continue to manifest as a problem. You start with like trust versus mistrust, and then autonomy versus doubt, blah blah blah. But
Oh,
when you're in
interesting.
like, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
um,
It sounds very,
uh,
very inspired by Freud's psychosexual stages, where if you can't figure something out
those
in one, you get stuck there forever, or whatever, become anal retentive or shit like that. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. It's one of three main it's there's Freud, there's Erikson, and there's Piaget. And those three are like the original like kind of ways of looking at development. And Freud came first, but primarily like for the most part is pretty outdated. Anything you have to say about
Yeah.
Freud, like you can say better with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But Erikson we look and like Piaget looks at like types of development and learning, but Erikson looks at those conflicts that we go through. And so the The one that we were just talking about with like teens and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, their role, their thing they're going through is identity versus role confusion.
Okay.
And it's just such an incredibly important stage for figuring out like who am I, like as cliche as that sounds,
Mm-hmm.
but like yeah, where do I belong, like what is my, who are my people, who's my family, like, and who are my friends, like who do I trust, where do I go with all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, with something like social media, it's just like feels like a constant rejection from all of it, because everything is really like, again, where everything's like presented so it like in its perfect light. Obviously we're not in general seeing people's struggles, like not real ones anyway, for the
Mm-hmm.
most part.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like that's one thing, again, when we talk about that brain development for an adult who's got a more or less fully developed executive center of your brain, we can think that through. It still impacts us, but we can think through like, okay, but I know this person's a person and they've got the other stuff going on, and they're, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for a teenager, you're in like kind of a second wave of egocentrism, which means like everything you see, you think of in terms of how it impacts you or how you impact it. You're like the star of your own movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, yeah, whatever anyone else is doing or whatever is happening around me has to by default have to do with me. And so you like, just in that stage of development, you are just primed to take everything super personally and internalize the fuck out of everything with very little rationalization and like real like, okay, slow down, take it, look at this seriously
Mm-hmm.
type of thinking. So yeah, it's pretty intense. So yeah, I guess my advice in general would be, yeah, on social media, like, yeah, don't ever feel pressured to start that sooner than you feel comfortable with it.
For sure.
Because there's not a whole lot of trade-off as far as the good that's coming from it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's inevitable. You also don't want your kid to be ostracized because they're the only ones who don't, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of times like it's worth trying to hold off a bit, or at least,
Mm-hmm.
tempering it, putting limits on things like, yeah,
Something.
time and stuff like that.
Just a totally random question.
Sure.
Do you study a lot or read a lot about attachment theory?
Oh yeah, yep, I love attachment theory.
Gotcha. Okay, just curious. That's kind of a meme thing.
Oh dude.
What?
Okay, no, you said it's kind of a mean thing. Are you like,
Oh no! I don't mean that thing is a mean thing. I mean me asking that question was kind of a mean thing. I'm sorry. I just,
oh okay.
yeah, sorry.
Don't set me up to look like an asshole.
No. That's okay.
All right.
Okay.
I didn't know if you'd like shit all over attachment theory in another stream or something.
No, I'm pretty sure attachment theory is like one of the leading ways that we analyze like child interactions and how that go, like carrying forward like the types of ways to raise kids right now, right? It's taken very seriously, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just make sure. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if I have anything else that I have questions or anything about. I guess here's a common, easy question. What do you think are like the most common mistakes that parents make?
Being inconsistent. Yeah, like no matter what you choose as like a style of how you do anything,
Mm-hmm.
if you're not consistent about it, it's not going to stick. You're going to make more work for yourself. So,
Yeah.
I think that's really underestimated
One,
because like, go ahead.
no, or you go ahead and you finish.
No, just that's yeah. It's really underestimated the impact of like, if I say this is a rule,
Mm-hmm.
but then okay, all right, well, all right, fine, today, whatever. Okay, yeah, but then you're gonna have to take your kid through unlearning that like
Mm-hmm.
40 more times that they're going to push back angrily about that because they got it the other time. So
Yeah. One of the biggest things that triggers the fuck out of me, and I'm so huge on, especially because me and my kid's mom are split, are that there are so many parents that have different parenting styles such that a child will go to a different parent when they need a different thing. I always feel like one of the most important things to successfully parent a child, especially when the parents are separated, is that like the rules and the rewards have to be the exact same for both parents. It drives me crazy that kids can get away with some things with some parents and not for others. And I feel like it's so toxic to the relationship between like the parents and the kids, because like the kid will feel like, oh, well, mom does this for me or dad does this for me, blah, 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 rather than the parents being on the same side. That's one of the probably the biggest triggers I have when it comes to like things that parents seem to fuck up a lot.
yeah, and it depends because it depends because agreed, like the when it comes to like actual like approaching things like discipline especially,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that is more so it's just such a freaking challenge going through between, because I teach co-parenting too,
Mm-hmm.
and this is like such a hard thing is going between like two households and like having to deal with the fact that yeah, they have totally different rules than you, and like kids transitioning back and forth between that,
Mm-hmm.
like that is tough, especially when you feel like okay, it takes a couple of days for them to get adjusted. All right, we're back in our rhythm now, and then they depending on your your schedule, then they go back and you have to kind of start over. That's really tough.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, ideally, of course, again, for that consistency's sake, for trying to like actually drive something home, that's ideal for everybody to be on the same page. But also there is another study that I really like that I'm interested in is uh so they looked at kids who had parents who were really committed to this idea of like, we don't fight in front of the kids, like we show a united front, like no matter what, like when we are dealing with the kids, we're absolutely always saying the same thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they looked at parents who like did not have that strongly held a philosophy on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went into that with the hypothesis that like, okay, well, the parents who are really committed to the united front, those kids are going to have more successful relationships later in life.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they found the exact opposite of that. They found that the kids with the parents who were not so committed to that
Mm-hmm.
tended to have more successful relationships later on. But it's because of like setting this unrealistic expectation that you're going to agree on everything, that you are the same person, that you're going to do everything the same way. And then you grow up and you get into a relationship with someone, and you have your honeymoon period, and then you get into your first big fight,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're like, oh, okay, well, this must not be right because my parents didn't fight like this. And it's like, well, yeah, they did, you just didn't ever get to see any of it. You never saw any like level of disagreement on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, when it comes to like, okay, what action are we taking with the kids? Yeah, you don't want to contradict each other, because you're right, that's super, super fucking toxic with like that. Yeah, getting to that manipulative stage where you're trying to like play everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like making sure that we're always totally completely like agreeing on everything or whatever, it's actually really healthy for your kids to see you disagree with people, and also demonstrate for them like, how do you disagree with people?
Yeah,
Like, what's a
I can
good way to
understand that.
advocate
Yeah.
for yourself?
So like having
Yeah.
the one
Yep.
parent scream at the other parent that they're a fucking moron and blah 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 is
Yeah, that's
probably not a good type of disagreement. But
I would
negotiating
would
something,
recommend it.
yeah, I can understand that for sure. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, like it's important for your kids to see you disagree, as long as they also see you make up or find resolution
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
to
for
that.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody comes out good.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but I mean, and in general, like it just the other piece of that being, it's so easy to fall into those reactionary, methods with kids when you're just making it up in the moment because you guys haven't agreed on stuff ahead of time. And yeah, reactionary like discipline in general, just it leads kids to be manipulative by nature, because like punishment, like a reactive punishment, doesn't teach somebody not to do something. It just teaches them not to get caught.
Yeah,
So
for
if I
sure.
can not get caught by asking the correct parent, like, yeah, of course I'm going to use that strategy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else you can think of, or?
Those, I know those are mostly the big ones that I kind of wanted to touch on. Oh, just I guess this wasn't something you said. This was, I'm not sure if this was Dan or Lycan or who
Probably
that said
Dan.
this, but probably.
No, this is okay.
But the the thing about like you guys had been talking about like not giving into a child, and then I think he brought up as a hypothetical, like, okay, yeah, but if they're crying in their crib, how long do you wait to go and talk to them or whatever?
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah. But just to clarify on that for anyone who's interested with that,
Mm-hmm.
it's actually like that's again a super common thing that people worry about is like, oh, I need to let my kid cry sometimes or else they'll never learn to self-soothe. They won't be able to uh, you know um, be without me at all. They'll be super clingy.
Mm-hmm.
And actually what we see is that's just absolutely not true at all of babies under 9 months old.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's impossible to spoil an infant under 9 months with like attention. So and actually kids that receive more attentive caregiving, like if you respond to your kid like really consistently whenever they cry or make a noise or whatever under the age of 9 months, those kids very consistently are way better at self-soothing when they get older.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that, again, that the Erickson stages thing, like the very first one is trust versus mistrust.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're learning, can I trust my needs will always be met, can I trust my environment that stuff's going to be okay? Well, that kid that's always been responded to has never felt like in those first 9 months they're not old enough to understand manipulation or like that they can get you to do something.
Sure.
And so they just see, when I'm hungry I get fed, when I'm wet I get changed, when I'm lonely I see somebody, when I'm feeling insecure or uncomfortable or whatever, I get cuddled or my position gets changed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they consistently see in those first 9 months, like everything is okay, like I'm never going to be in too much pain, those kids are way less like anxious when they get older and like the things
Yeah.
they get upset about are like,
And this
it's not
sounds
a
like it
big deal.
harkens back hardcore to like, I'm pretty sure this is one of the hallmarks of having a secure attachment pattern is that you,
Yep.
even if the parent isn't there all the time, you know that in times of need, if something actually bad is happening, that somebody will be there to care for you. You're not going to be completely abandoned or left on your own. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry about teaching your kids to self-soothe 9 months and up.
Sure. Yeah. When they're like 6 months old. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Someone in chat, this is a random question. Do you have
Sure.
specific tips for twins?
Oh my God, twins are so hard. I wish I did. In fact, one of the biggest complaints like that I have about a lot of the the curriculums that, because we work with evidence-based curriculums, and obviously I pull in everything else from other sources and stuff like that. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what dealing with multiple kids of any age is so fucking hard. It's so
Mm-hmm.
much harder. Like they say, like 1 is 1 and 2 is 10 when
Mm-hmm.
it comes to kids, because like one focusing on one kid is one thing, but like trying to spread your attention between multiple kids is so fucking hard. But I guess when we talk about multiple kids, I mean clearly that's like a super broad question. It would depend on what the specific topic was, but a lot of times I guess just as a broad thing is just try not to fall into the trap of playing mediator
Mm-hmm.
when you have like any kind of like stuff like sibling rivalries, or like you don't know what happened between them somewhere else, or you'd trying getting bogged down in like trying to like figure out who's telling the truth, or like what they need to do or whatever. Like as much as possible, like you want to be a just kind of like an enforcer of whatever consequence needs to happen. So being like, all right, I don't know who did what, I don't know who broke whatever, but you guys either need to like figure out how to do this, or you're gonna have to play in separate rooms for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as possible, try not to be the arbiter of who's
So
right
what
or
you just
wrong.
gave, that's an example of like a good thing to do, like
Yeah,
figure it out on your own, like being able to, okay, yeah,
yeah.
gotcha.
Try as much as possible, as long as nobody's bleeding. Like
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously a little hyperbolic, but
Yeah.
yeah, as long as it's nothing too severe. Like it's really easy to get caught up in like pumping a ton of energy and effort into like solving kids' problems between them.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of times we can give them more credit, they'll figure stuff out together socially. But having that ultimatum, kind of call it an either or choice of like, okay, either you do the thing I'm asking you to do, which is either like figure your shit out, or you guys are gonna have to play in separate rooms, or like that toy's gone for the rest of the day, like, or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
usually something that's just going to take the problem away, rather than trying to address consequences to like individual kids when you weren't there.
Yeah.
So
How do you? So my mom hated how much me and my sister fought, and she would constantly like, "This is not normal, you guys," because I would always just try to antagonize my sister. What's like a normal level of like sibling fighting? I guess like what should
I'm
like at
not
what
sure how to
point?
quantify that.
Yeah, I guess like obviously you don't want them physically injuring each other, but so like my prerogative in life was basically to antagonize my sister as much as possible, right up to the point before she would tattle. Is usually how it would go, and she would usually tell if it came down to me like threatening to like drown her Barbie or something really. I don't know. I did really stupid things as a kid, but like assuming that you have like two siblings that just like antagonize each other like that. like, do you think that the parents should have a more active role in that, or especially because oftentimes in an antagonistic scenario, I imagine it would be kind of one-sided. Do you leave like the person being antagonized to fend for themselves, or like what is the yeah, like how do you do this? I guess what's the appropriate way to resolve that?
I mean, it's like it's gonna depend a bit on the age, but in
Mm-hmm.
general, like if we're talking about a kid over 5, because when we look at like 1 to 5, you've got kind of that again emotional lack of rational, like whatever. You're better just trying to break it up and like just distract them, move on. But if you're looking at kids who are around 5 or older, um, really trying to like if you have a kid who's being antagonized a lot, like kind of empowering them almost to like to kind of like deal with the situation but not leaving them out in the cold.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about like who owns the problem, so deciding if like this is something that you as a parent own, so like is my child's safety at risk, are they like is something I need to step in, or else it's not going to get solved,
Mm-hmm.
or is it possible like that with some guidance maybe my kiddo can deal with this, or whatever. And then to like have a conversation with them that's really based on that like that empathy piece. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know that sounds a little like I don't know, hands off, because like just relating to their feelings and then leaving them to it. But the truth is a lot of times that is how they're going to build those skills as far as dealing with other people and dealing with like big complicated adult things like setting boundaries and stuff like that. Like talking them through like how they feel about a situation and learning to label emotions and stuff. Like that's a big, again, this is kind of broad depending on the age of the child. But that's one of the best things we can do for kids from a really young age is give them an emotional vocabulary. Because like if you tell somebody, not that this would have worked on you, again, another kid who's trying to drown her Barbie, but telling somebody I'm mad at you, I'm pissed at you, versus saying I'm like I feel really like let down by, or I feel like whatever, like that's something that's going to serve them later. So like at least you're kind of building up that skill set. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as in the moment, yeah, we're going to come back to like I don't know, are they mostly okay, because it's probably pretty normal. So
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
as long as no one's like
Mm-hmm.
traumatized.
Or getting killed or anything. Yeah. Okay.
That too, yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Um. Okay. Yeah. I don't think I can think of anything else.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Oh, I got one more. Okay, this is a
Alrighty.
really hard one for me. So when I was growing up, I love being frustrated by tasks because pushing through that, the reward at the end is like very, very, very fulfilling for me. One thing I noticed is that for Nathan, it's very if something is frustrating for him, sometimes he'll want to like put it down and just immediately go and do something else. What's a good balance of like frustrating your kid to like push through something versus like accommodating that frustration? How do you figure out like what an appropriate level of balance is there?
So the best thing you can do with anything like that is you want to work with like encouragement and taking breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, if they are at that point where they're feeling like overwhelmed and stuck, like kids especially shut down. Like
Yeah.
so it's really easy to push them over into that point of like just there's no coming back in this moment, because
Mm-hmm.
they feel a lot of pressure on them. They feel stupid because they can't do it. Like they feel stupid because we're putting this expectation on them of like you can do this. It's not that hard. Like whatever. And even if we're not saying those exact words, sometimes that's the message that we send, is that like you can do this, and we're trying to make that an empowering thing. But it's really easy to take away the message like, okay, well, if you're so sure I can do this, why am I struggling so hard?
Gotcha.
And so that's super discouraging. So like if they're feeling overwhelmed with something, like having them take a break, like letting them know like we are going to come back to this, but like I want to just take 10 minutes, or I want to whatever, we'll come back at this again after dinner, or like tomorrow or whatever. And then like when we come back at it, like at any point, like letting it be okay that they're frustrated with it, like even acknowledging it, like, yeah, this is a tough thing, dude. And
Mm-hmm.
like, it's really great that you're still continuing to work on it. Are you familiar with Carol Dweck at all, and like growth versus fixed mindsets?
Nope.
Okay. So, basically, with a fixed mindset, it's like black and white thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So you get this idea of like, I'm either good at something or I'm not. With a growth mindset, it's like just that, like I've got room to grow. So maybe I'm not good at something, but I could get good at something if I worked on it or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And Yeah, it's really common for us to put kids into this fixed mindset with things
Hmm.
because we say things like, "Oh, there's like my kid's an athlete," or "My kid, you're really good at this," or and kids
Oh,
will
I
say things
understand.
like,
Yeah. Oh, so like on the
yeah, like
opposite of this, so like I hate words like talented. I try to avoid using words like that
yes,
as much as possible because
yes, so
yeah.
true.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's and there's a lot of like, there's a lot of studies right now that come out about like the gifted and talented like programs and stuff, and how those actually kind of can fuck kids over for a long time to come, like getting that label put on you of like you're gifted and talented, like you're special,
Hmm.
and then you inevitably struggle with something like when
Hmm.
you get older because that's something that's going to happen, and then it really like fucking your self-esteem like a lot because you're trying so hard to protect this label that
Hmm.
is something you just don't always have control over. So when we praise kids for like being smart, telling them you're so smart, or you're so like an athletic ability or something that's like innate that they don't have total control over, that really, yeah, it doesn't, it creates that kind of frustration, that overwhelmed sense of like, well, I don't want to try anyway.
Hmm.
So the thing to like to test this out is they gave a um they did a study where they were like a bunch of fifth graders, and they gave them tests that were like really easy, like 10 questions or whatever, and they knew they did pretty well. And they praised one group of kids by saying, good job, you must have worked really hard at this, and the other kids by saying, you must be really smart at this.
Hmm.
And so the kids that were told you're really smart at this, they then like they followed up with all the groups, and they did like another test that they got to choose. Okay, do you want to choose the harder test? That'll be like a really good opportunity to to test yourself, or do you want to choose the easier test? You'll surely do well on it. It's about the same level as the first one.
Hmm.
And I think 90% of the kids who were praised for being hard workers chose the harder test, because
Hmm.
that makes sense, because that's the label they're protecting. You were praised for like working hard at it. Yeah, I want to show you that I can work hard on it. It's
Hmm.
okay if I don't do it great, because that wasn't what I was protecting. Whereas the kid who's been told like, oh, you're really smart at this, most of them want to make sure they stay looking smart, so they tend to play it safe. And so even of those that take the harder test, they tend to make excuses. So they're like, oh, I don't like the way this question's written, it's stupid, like I don't even care about this test anyway. Like, what's this even mean?
Hmm.
Again, because it's so much more, there's so much more at risk to say like, I was trying and I did poorly, if you're protecting yourself as being someone smart, as opposed to saying you're a good worker and you're a hard worker, you're a real like get up and try again kind of person. And then realizing like, oh, it's okay if I don't do a good job, it's that I kept at it and I worked hard. So yeah, with kids, when you're dealing with something like getting really frustrated with working through tasks, we want to try to like reiterate that label of like, something like that's really cool, dude, is that you're trying again today. Like, I know it was really rough yesterday, I know like you got super frustrated with it, which is fine, like it's tough, but
Hmm.
it's so cool that you're trying again today, even though like it was, we had a hard time. Like, good for you. Like, even like little things like that with the way we talk to kids make a big
Gotcha.
difference.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Remember to hit that like and subscribe, and don't forget the notification bell so that my videos show up right in your feed.
True story. When I was 5 years old, she said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "I'd like to be a food store." And she said, "That's funny. What kind of store would you like to own?" I said, "No, I want to be a food store."